Hey friends, if we haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is Jeremiah and I have the privilege of being a pastor here at Table Church. And this past weekend we began our Christmas countdown. And if you weren't able to join us for Table Talk last night, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of catch up and see where we went, where we're headed, so that you might have an opportunity to settle in with us and come spend the holidays here with us at Table Church as we get ready to launch in 2026. I don't know what your experience has been like, but I grew up in the church my whole life, and it seemed like every year as Christmas approached, there was almost this obligatory lesson in either children's church or Sunday school or somewhere along the way that was trying to convince all of us kids what Christmas was and wasn't about, right? And so despite all the cultural trappings to the contrary, we were reminded year after year after year that Christmas isn't about Santa, and it's not about Rudolph or the tree or the presents. Right? Most definitely, Christmas is not about the presents. Because Christmas is about Jesus. And he's way better than presents. That was usually the lesson we were supposed to take away. And so even then, every year as we made our Christmas list of all the new stuff that we hoped to find under the Christmas tree, it was being drilled into our minds the importance that we understood Christmas isn't about new stuff, because Christmas is about Jesus. But what I want to do in the time we have over the next few weeks is to begin to take that idea and turn it on its head if we could. I want us to explore a big idea together that says Christmas means new stuff precisely because Christmas is about Jesus. All right, there's this sense that Christmas isn't about the presents, it's not about new stuff, it's about Jesus. But I want us to begin to explore what it might mean for Christmas to mean new stuff precisely because Christmas is about Jesus. And I don't say that because I think the dear, sweet, saintly folks who taught me as a child in Sunday school got it wrong. I say that because I believe they got it right, and they instilled something deep within me about what Christmas really means. And so we want to spend some time looking into the New Testament together. And to start us off, we want to begin where the New Testament begins in Matthew chapter 1. So listen to what Matthew says at the beginning of his gospel. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez, the father of Hezron, Hezron, the father of Ram, Ram, the father of Amminadab, Amminadab, the father of Nahshon, Nahshon, the father of Salmon, Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, and Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Solomon, the father of Rehoboam, Rehoboam, the father of Abijah, the father of Asa, the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat, the father of Jehoram, Jehoram, the father of Uzziah, Uzziah, the father of Jotham, Jotham, the father of Ahaz, Ahaz, the father of Hezekiah, Hezekiah, the father of Manasseh, Manasseh, the father of Ammon, Ammon, the father of Josiah, and Josiah, the father of Jeconiah and his brothers, at the time of the exile to Babylon. After the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel. Shealtiel was the father of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel, the father of Abiud. Abiud, the father of Eliakim. Eliakim, the father of Azor. Azor was the father of Zadok. Zadok was the father of Achim. Achim was the father of Eliud. And Eliud, the father of Eleazar. Eleazar, the father of Mathan. Mathan, the father of Jacob. And Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. Thus there were 14 generations in all, from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. So talk about a Christmas list, am I right? If you decide to read the New Testament straight through, which I would suggest it's not a bad idea, it's not a bad goal to set for yourself, maybe as we head into the new year, but if you decided to sit down and read the New Testament straight through, the first thing you would encounter is the text that we just read together, what Matthew calls the genealogy of Jesus. Literally, the text says this is the book of the beginning of Jesus, the Genesis of Jesus. And so what we find here is this list of names that anchors us in the story of the Old Testament, the story of God's people, Israel. But it's not just a list of names, it's a list of names that Matthew has carefully organized into equal numbers of generations. Right, to do that, he probably had to leave some people out. We know from the records of the kings of Israel, there were some names that got skipped, not to leave out historical accuracy, but because Matthew is trying to frame the story of Jesus in a way to help us understand what it really means, what it's all about. And so he frames this story in these equal sections of this genealogy, so that there are 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 generations from David to the start of the exile, and 14 generations from the exile to Jesus. And so by doing that, what Matthew is trying to scream at us right here from the beginning of his story of Jesus is that with Jesus, we're at the start of the next great chapter of what God is doing in this world. The start of the next great chapter of the story of God and his people. And so by starting the New Testament this way, Matthew wants us to read Jesus' story in light of the already unfolding story of God's people, while also signaling to us that in Jesus, God is doing some new stuff. So what was the big idea we started with? That Christmas means new stuff precisely because Christmas is about Jesus. So let's dig into this for a minute. Matthew begins his book, his gospel of Jesus, with the Genesis. And he starts, interestingly enough, not with creation, but with a man named Abraham. If you're familiar with the Old Testament, if you recall the first part of the book of Genesis, there's a bunch of stuff here that Matthew just kind of glosses right past. He doesn't begin with creation. He doesn't begin with the Garden of Eden. He doesn't begin with Adam. He begins with a man named Abraham. And if you aren't familiar with Abraham, or if you want a refresher, here's the short version. Abraham's this guy in the Old Testament who God makes some promises to. He was 75 years old when God comes to him and tells him he wants him to pack up everything he has, take his wife Sarah, and leave everything he knows, and go to the land that God will show him. Right? Abraham doesn't even get like the end point of the journey, nothing he can punch into the GPS. God just says, you start going, and when you get where I want you to be, I'll let you know. The text of the book of Genesis tells us that God tells Abraham to go, and so Abraham went. And in response to his faithfulness, God makes him a promise. Let's look at this in Genesis chapter 12. God tells Abram, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Now we have to reorient ourselves a little bit, because in the world of the Old Testament, the promise to become a great nation is going to carry with it the assumption, the idea of lineage, of descendants. Because when we hear nations, we think colored plots of land on a map. We think borders. We think countries. But in the Old Testament world, nations were made up of tribes that were essentially extended families. And so when God tells Abraham, I'm going to make you into a great nation, the assumption would be, this is going to be a large family. There's only one problem with that. If you remember Abraham's story, Abraham don't got no kids. Right? Now, that's not great grammar, but it's also not the best way to start a nation either. And so Abraham, 75 years old, has no kids. And through the rest of his story, we see how God works to establish this promise. How God gives him a son named Isaac. And how Isaac becomes the father of Jacob, who becomes the father of Judah and his brothers. And how Judah becomes the father of Perez and Zerah. Do you see how we just entered into that story through Matthew's telling us the book of the beginning of Jesus? But it's the last part of God's promise to Abraham that we really need to make sure we get if we want to know why Christmas means new stuff, because Christmas is about Jesus. God tells Abram, all the nations of the earth will be blessed through you. And throughout the Old Testament, Abraham's descendants, the nation of Israel, the sons and daughters of Jacob and his descendants, their role, their calling was to be a light to the nations, what they would call the Gentiles, so that all nations, all peoples could know God and become a part of God's diverse family of faith. What the New Testament is going to go on to tell us is how Jesus fulfills God's plan for a new people. You see, the story of the New Testament is really telling us how Jesus fulfills God's plan for a new people. So that all nations will be blessed through Abraham and his descendants. Listen to the way the Apostle Paul describes this in his letter to the Galatian churches. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 7, Paul writes this. He says, understand then that those who have faith are children of Abraham. Scripture foresaw that God would justify the Gentiles by faith and announced the gospel in advance to Abraham. All nations will be blessed through you. So those who rely on faith are blessed along with Abraham, the man of faith. Jump down to verse 13. Paul continues. He says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who hung on a pole. He redeemed us in order that the blessing given to Abraham might come to the Gentiles, the nations, the ethnos, through Christ Jesus, so that by faith we might receive the promise of the Spirit. See, Jesus fulfills God's plan for a new people. A people defined and united, not by their physical descent, not by their ethnicity, but by faith in the God of Abraham. A new family, a new people, just like God promised. That's what we mean when we say that Christmas means new stuff, precisely because Christmas is about Jesus. It's how in Jesus the promise to Abraham and the words of the prophet are fulfilled. Listen to what the prophet Isaiah said centuries before Jesus was born in chapter 9. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, God, humbled the land of Zebulun, the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, for the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, and light has dawned. So as we begin our countdown to Christmas, we celebrate the light that shines in the darkness. And we acknowledge the new stuff that God is doing through Jesus. And we embrace what it means to become the new people of God, a family of faith, drawn from all nations, from all tribes, from all ethnicities, united around the table as God's family. Friends, I hope you'll have the opportunity to join us as we continue our countdown to Christmas each Sunday, beginning at 4:30, 320 Holly Springs Road here in Lyman. We would love for you to come share life with us around the table as we continue to explore what it means to understand that Christmas means new stuff. Have a great week. Hope to see you soon. God bless.